Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. Happy to be here with Chris and at the Ephemera Fair, and you were saying just before I hit record that you're more than just your average visitor to the Ephemera Fair, that your graphics are part of the reason that people are here and know what to expect. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's the group that produces this fair. They are both good friends and a client. And I've worked with them now for about 10 years on various projects in other cities where they produce major fairs, including fairs at the Park Avenue Armory in New York and things like that. So they had asked me, would I get involved in this? And I said, happily. I'd very much like to get involved in this. And part of that is because I have my own ephemera, and then my larger family, my brothers and cousins, and we've got ephemera from generations previous that we're still talking about what should we do with all of this. So this was something I wanted to satisfy my curiosity about ephemera.
It reminds me of almost some kind of like revival meeting or something, because we're all here and we appreciate what we're doing. It's not like, because I think a lot of other spheres of life, people wouldn't really understand collecting ephemera. Like, they wouldn't get it. Or, like, why would you want to hold a bunch of old pieces of paper around? But here, people get it. And we're all, like, celebrating it.
And even people who've never collected before, but if they're going through things that belong to their parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles, and they see old beautiful stamps or maps or posters or things like that, it starts to get an interest.
Well, you would know better than most, I would imagine, about. I was just talking to somebody previous to this about the time and effort that goes into even the most modest-sized illustration or graphic. That, a stamp. I mean, some of those stamps are very ornate.
Very ornate,
and
yes.
Probably took the designer of it, especially depending on when they made it, a significant amount of time.
A lot of time, as well as how it was being presented, the printing process, and what type of printing press it was going on, and could they use only one ink color, or could they use more than one ink color? So there's all of these considerations that have to be thought through by the person designing the piece.
Yeah. I would imagine that probably extends to things like your ordinary gas station road map.
Absolutely.
And so you were telling me that you have been a longtime collector of such things, and you inherited that practice from your dad.
Yes.
So when you would take road trips, tell me about that. When did it, as far as you can remember, when did that start? What was like the...
That started for me in the late 1950s. because that's when we started traveling, and I was a very wee tot. But we started traveling, driving across the country, and anytime you would stop and get gasoline, they always offered you a map. And since we drove through so many states, we collected a lot of maps from different gasoline, oil companies, many of which are no longer in existence today. And in the 50s and 60s and even early 70s, there were still a lot of regional small oil companies that did their own maps and had their own gas stations and their own look and everything. So, and then plus my brothers and I were just always curious about geography, and we would look at the full map of the lower 48 states of the U.S. and just look at all this highway system that had been developed, and so it's a method of learning geography as well.
Absolutely. I've been practicing this since I was a kid, of just putting out maps on the floor of my house or on table, any surface really, and just examining it, studying it. Even if I'm not going there, just learning about places.
Right.
And it gives you such a much better, clear picture of spatial awareness, the world around you, just where things are in proximity to each other, and appreciation for that. And when you finally do get to go to those places, you're like, oh yeah, I know it. That's so cool. So much of our fare around us, a lot of this print material, especially I'd say throughout the 20th century, was there to support something else.
Yes.
So, or connected to. And so you mentioned gas stations, road maps. I can imagine that the post-World War II era through probably the 90s was just perfect time for that collaboration to take place, because people were hitting the road. Any chance they could get, they would be on a trip.
Yeah, because it wasn't until airfare travel or air travel was reasonable, most people were still driving, and we're curious about going different places and seeing the land and seeing the cities and towns. And then the beauty of studying maps and learning about the highway system is the highway system tended to follow the railroads, which followed the rivers. So you were usually driving with nearby railroad tracks and a major river. And that was fascinating and also quite beautiful.
You learned so much about the history. I mean, it wasn't like you just said, there's almost zero roads that are like a new road, 100% new road.
That's right.
Like the paved car road is just the latest iteration of point A to point B that's existed. And so you get to learn about the history, heritage, culture. You learn about economics. You can learn about just really any kind of social science you want, and not in a classroom way, just like your own exploration of it.
Exactly.
And it really just adds to your... And so in that sense, even if the people who were designing these maps in the 50s, 60s, 70s were not... I can't imagine too many maps had like the picture of the guy who made it on there, or signed by, like you bring it to him, like, could you sign my map? But what must have been their status in society? A cartographer, even if they're not the ones who are actually mapping, by taking the map and putting it into this easy to read, access, attractive, 'cause unless it's the gas station attendant handing it to you, if you have a whole display of maps and different kinds of brochures and things like that, it stands out. What status must they have had?
I'm not sure that people were that aware of them. Certainly, geography professors and cartography professors and around schools would know who these people were, but they probably were not that well known. And, early maps were smaller, and then the maps got larger, and I'm curious, something I don't know is who actually invented the fold of these maps to make them so big.
Or who decided that's the way we're going to do it.
Who decided?
Maybe it was predetermined when the first glove compartment was designed.
Probably, yes.
You can't have, because these things are not handy to carry around in your pocket.
They were for the car.
It was specifically for the car. This one I have is, for those of you listening, the official transportation map of Massachusetts for 1973 and 74, and it starts with a nice welcome from the governor.
Yes,
right?
yeah. And that was the other thing that started happening with maps is the states decided to produce them rather than letting the private enterprise produce them, so that the governor could get his or her picture on, and a little welcome to everyone, and that still goes on today.
Yeah, public relations.
Yes,
And in that sense, the designer of the map and the layout of it has a bit of a role in, and if that elevates their status in PR type work.
Yes,
they're
absolutely.
trying to decide, as you unfold this, what are the things that you're seeing.
Right.
This other one is an Exxon map, so this is coincidentally of the nation's capital, but it's not produced by the federal government. And the first thing on the graphic that you see is what you were describing. Here's the gas station attendant.
Yes, there they are.
Giving directions to. Is that you and your dad?
Not quite, but
over there, like as if you couldn't see the Washington Monument right behind you. I don't think there's a gas station that close, but and their colors of their company are red, white, and blue. It's making these connections. As a graphic artist yourself, when you're designing something, do you have that in mind as you're putting together a piece?
Always, because it kind of depends on who I'm designing for, what level of emphasis do they want things to be, do they want a certain style, and how many colors are available for me to use. I like to use lots of color, but in the case of what I did for this fair, we just did two very vibrant colors that work very well together.
There's, and I guess you're right. Nobody, when it comes to these maps, there's just so many of them from that era that there would be no way for us to even recognize by name.
No.
And I'm not even sure if those of us using it would even take the time to consider. Like, it's almost like maps. It's like, I know it sounds kind of abstract and weird, but it's almost like the infrastructure itself put the map together itself. Like all the roads are talking to each other and be like, okay, this is how. Because then you get those silly ones that you get when you go to visit some touristy type place. It's all cartoony and nothing is to scale. And, and it's like, there's not a giant ice cream cone in this town. Like, because I'm using this cartoon map that nothing's actually relative, and it will say that in the bottom, like, do not use this to navigate at all. Because like this one of Albuquerque, I think a lot of these are from the 60s, 70s. I think this one's from the 80s. This one came from a bank.
Yes. Well, the gas stations or the state governments produced the state maps, but then banks usually produced the local town map or city map.
Would that be just to make sure that robbers would be able to navigate there? Like they grab one on their way out?
It was just one more way to get their logo in front of the public.
Because this one, I remember looking at it last year, and I think this is one of the last maps that has Route 66 labeled.
Oh yes,
as
Route
a regular.
66 went right through Albuquerque, and I was on that road as a child.
It is, I think, you'll see it immediately. Yep, there's 66, and it's not listed as historic Route 66. It's just regular U.S. Route 66, and it was like right after this map came out that they retired Route 66, and it became designated historic in the places that it's still paved and usable. And so it's like these maps by extension, and again, the designer of it might not realize they're doing this, but they are documenting history. They're documenting the past because, as like you said before, these roads themselves are connected at least in some way to another previous mode of transportation. So there's the history there. And then on top of that, you have the documenting of those places. And now, do you use maps on Google or Waze or any of the apps like that?
No, I don't. I have looked, I view online maps from time to time, but I really like to look at a printed map, and I still buy a Rand McNally Road Atlas every year.
Oh, good.
Which has been the gold standard for a long time.
I mean, that is another component of this is a lot of these maps that I have the years displayed on them front and center because we just said about Albuquerque, but they don't want to be stuck in a situation where somebody drives to a dead end that wasn't a dead end or a bridge that is out of service or something like that.
And with constant changes in transportation and roads and new freeways, they've got to keep updated.
I like this one. This is of Aurora, Colorado. And unlike the other ones, it has ads on it. Oh, La Quinta. That's an early La Quinta. Obviously, things like motels would make sense. It kind of reminds me of when it's like when you visit a diner and their placemats have bordered with ads.
Sometimes placemats are maps.
And it's like, yeah, exactly. In fact, this placemat right here is a map of Maine. It's not a road map. Can't get anywhere can't get that from here. But it's not a usable map. We can't find buried treasure or anything like that. But just like the diner placemat and this, the intended audience of it could be dual purpose, either a visitor. Because sometimes when I'm at a diner and I'm looking at these ads, I'm like, well, some of these are for local business, like snowplow service. Like if I'm a traveler, that means nothing to me. I'm not going to call this guy up to plow my driveway if I live 200 miles from here. And, in good form, this Colorado has a liquor store on a road map. This one makes sense. High pressure car wash. Yeah, you're driving a car.
That's a good one.
The motel makes sense.
And probably flat tire repair would be a good one.
I'm sure that'd be in there too, or maybe some kind of thing. So it's like a nice combination of, this is the Denver metro area, so I guess Aurora is part of that. It would make sense that, you could live in a big city like Denver and not know exactly every single street.
Every street.
You might be good for locals as well as for travelers at the same time. So, maps, I think you and I share a love of these things because
there's a lot of information to be had on a map.
Yeah.
And it's more than just the geography of it. If you look closely, you can find state parks or city parks or different landmarks and rivers, lakes, things like that, mountains.
As much as I'm a primary source guy, I also like to use maps in my classroom, and I challenge my students when we put up a map. We critique the map sometimes. Sometimes it's like, what information is missing from here that you could really use? Or in some cases, is it too busy? Is there too much information on this map that you can actually navigate it? Is the key like 46 symbols long and you can't, okay, so what is that swirly thing meant to be? This is a map of Paris that somebody... I like this one a lot because these aren't my notes. Is somebody else put their little notes of what they wanted to see. But even just these zoomed in, it's kind of overwhelming.
It's very busy.
I'm like, am I gonna? But this is more of a pocket map.
Yes.
Because if I was walking around any major city in the world and I opened up my giant map in front of me, I'm like, please, steal from my wallet.
Pick my pocket while I'm looking at
unless
this
you're
map.
in Montreal. The Canadian cities, they're all very friendly.
They're very
they'll
friendly.
help you out. So I love talking about this stuff. We could talk maps all day, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
One of my favorite subjects. Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.